Hello UMF community and symposium viewers, my name is Samantha Taylor. I am a visual arts major and a music major here at UMF. I am filming this to fulfill my Wilson Fellowship presentation. So this presentation is based off the research and art that I have generated during my creative project. The title of this creative project is Moldables for Sale. The subtitle is The Fun House. I think that I should start with some observations and some questions that I was looking to answer. During my time in quarantine, there has been a lot of time that I've spent on social media, as everyone has been, and I've just noticed some things that were a little concerning about, young women on the internet. There's a lot of expectations for young women to become influencers so that they can make incomes or whatever, and the companies that tend to employ young influencers, especially young women influencers, are very hyper specific to like a certain market of femininity, a certain personality, a certain sales group. So there are a lot of young women that are turning to aesthetics as a means to fulfill a personality trait, or turning to products as a means to produce an identity that they can sell back. There's clearly some issues with capitalism at play, and there's definitely some issues with misogyny and the male gaze at play that I wanted to really isolate and figure out, because as a young woman who spends time on social media myself, I've just been growing really concerned about the state of things and how women must perform on the internet in order to avoid criticism or harassment, or even worse, to be a product. There are a few questions that I was looking to answer. How deep, historically, does the objectification of women go? Why hasn't technology improved the state of, feminism thus far? And what is empowerment? What does it mean to have a strong feminine identity? And what exactly is that empowerment to young women? And where could we find it? Some specific people that I was looking at includes Donna Haraway. She wrote the Cyborg Manifesto. It's an optimistic kind of paper about the future of online presence, what it means for gender, what it means for sexuality, what it means for misogyny, what it means for women, stuff like that. Simone de Beauvoir, a really classic second wave feminist. She's amazing. She writes incredibly well. She's hilarious too. And speaking of hilarious, we have Iu Susraya. She is an artist from Finland. Iu Susraya from Finland is a genius artist, in my opinion. She uses photography kind of similarly, but very differently from Cindy Sherman. Utilized photography as a medium to make some references to art history, make some references to body, to personality, to identity, and to combat the male gaze like no one other. She is hilarious. She is so self-aware. I really do love her. I have a big crush on her. Cindy Sherman, as I previously mentioned, she has done some historical explorations of film tropes, of media tropes of women, of things that should have been brought to people's attention that she wanted to be made aware of. And I feel similarly to her work today, where I've been just noticing tropes in influencer culture of young women who identify, as a trope or as a category or as a market group. We have the e-girl, we have the kawaii culture, we have cottagecore, alt scene, goth, these things aren't inherently problematic, but when they become markets and when they become products, and when women feel the need to look or act a certain way to fit into a group, that's the problem. I have some goals that I kept in mind when making this project. So what I've learned from some of the artists that I've been studying is that being self-aware, being aware of art history, being aware of social history, being aware of all these conversations, and being an informed artist is where you find strength in your argument and in your voice. This means that you trust your instincts. That means you trust the things that you've learned, you trust yourself. staying aware of what your decisions do in a greater conversation. There's so many things that you need to be aware of when you're making art. It's a huge responsibility, but you're only going to be effective if you're aware of these conversations. And so these are the things that I kept in mind while I was developing my funhouse. The funhouse aimed to address historical and biological oppression of women, commercialized misogyny, and the male gaze's omnipotence in women's lives, especially now where the internet can send the male gaze and its expectations right to you at any instant. And I felt that in order to tackle these things, I had to use specific materials in order to get this point across. So this includes consumer objects, which you can see in Happy First Bleed, which is a rite of passage party, but kind of a pitiful one. You can see it in my art objects, so things that I have handmade, like my wall of nipples, have a certain fakeness to their realism that kind of are meant to be a dual-edged sword of reality and objectification at the same time, as well as body objects. Just so much body must exist in this conversation. It's a biological conversation, it's a personal conversation, it's a human conversation, and therefore the body is just absolutely necessary as a material. And that objectification, of course, requires you to know what you're doing with it. Some of this artwork might seem terribly misguided and misplaced, but it comes from, a lot of research, and in that research, I couldn't imagine developing that piece without it. So, for example, the Vagiomatic comes from some discussions with my collaborator, Sarah Taylor, and from the readings that I have done of Simone de Beauvoir. Simone de Beauvoir does a lot of talking about the woman's body as a place of creation and destruction, as a place where life can be made, but also life can be rejected. Hostile and a protective space. It is a multifaceted, kind of holy or spiritual presence, that women have the power to control. And therefore, Vagiomatic is a machine born of those sorts of conversations where we have a pizza oven, a place of warmth and creation. We have a pencil sharpener, a place of destruction, but also sharpening. We have a crematorium, which is a really intense visual. However, it is, a place of ultimate, end of life. Whereas usually we see woman's body as place of birth. So I really wanted to reclaim that space, that body space, as all of the things that it is, rather than just the things that society expects it to be. Most difficult task of the funhouse was installing. I had to turn a white wall gallery into a funhouse, into a party space, into, kind of an ironic situation of bouncing bodies, bouncing women, flashing lights, balloons that are bouncing, just so much movement and energy. And this was in part thanks to my collaborator, Sarah, as well as just being aware of the power that each of my pieces holds, where they fit in space, and how they talk to each other. I found that my pieces were meant to be together in the end. There are pieces that can live in separate spaces in galleries like many of my peers' work and still be connected, either by, reference to each other, reference to the pieces around them, things like that. But I felt that it was really important to create an installation, a full immersive experience, a completely overwhelming and completely mind-boggling experience, kind of to replicate that experience you get when you turn on your phone. I just wanted to be able to hone in on a space where you have no choice but to look and to take in. I am really proud of the work that I developed, but I'm also proud of the things that I discovered while I was making it. First, I want to touch again on the power of installation as a medium. I don't think that the pieces that I made would live together without living together. They wouldn't talk to each other the same way, and it wouldn't receive the same amount of feedback as it would if they were separate or alone in a corner or anything like that. commenting on, what I've discovered from Simone de Beauvoir and Io Susraya, there's humor in the inevitable of the male gaze. There is a power in being able to laugh at its ridiculousness, and I think that's where a lot of my power and my voice has come from. There's a lot of silly things about the objectification of women and what traits we're kind of expected to display and rely on. But those things are funny. And a lot of my art was developed with the thought, well, wouldn't it be funny if I added this? What if I hung those intimate drawings with dildos on the wall? What would it do then? What kind of language can I produce? What can I pull from it? What can I play with? And in that playing, in that taking control through humor, taking control through play, I found a lot of power in that. I also noticed that there's just many parallels in digital culture today and all of human history. What is a e-girl now is not much different than the expectations of a housewife in the 1950s, is not that much different than the expectations of a fertile goddess. They may look different and have different names, but in the end they all oppress women. And those are things that we need to be wary of every single day. What kinds of things are we being told to purchase? What kinds of things are we being sold as happiness and comfort and femininity that simply aren't those things? It's an important reminder that this male gaze has continued to influence us, even as we feel like we are the influencers ourselves. We're still at the will of this hyper-misogynistic, hyper-commercialist world, and there's a long way to go. But I think that, continuing to make work like this is at least my answer to that question. So, thank you for watching, and let me know if you have any questions. Bye-bye.